World War II veterans commemorate the D-Day anniversary, and yet another close call involving the American and Chinese militaries. All of that and more, today, June 6th, 2023. Good morning, Early Birds. I'm Jonathan Lehrfeld, and this is the Early Bird Brief, produced by Defense News and Military Times. First up, dozens of World War II veterans are in Normandy today to mark the anniversary of D-Day. On June 6, 1944, Allied troops carried by 7,000 boats landed on the beaches codenamed Omaha, Utah, Juno, Sword, and Gold. On that single day, 4,414 Allied soldiers lost their lives. 2,501 of them were Americans. More than 5,000 were wounded. Several thousand German soldiers were also killed or wounded. More than 40 American World War II veterans formed a parade on Sunday using wheelchairs along the streets of the small town of Sainte-Mère-Église, where thousands of paratroopers jumped not long after midnight on D-Day. The veterans then headed to Sainte-Marie-du-Mont for a brief ceremony at a monument honoring the U.S. Navy that overlooks Utah Beach. Veterans were due to take part in official ceremonies of the 79th anniversary today, including at the Normandy American Cemetery. Another important story, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin discussed upgrading the U.S. partnership with India. Officials said Austin set a roadmap for cooperation for the next 5 years. This came as both countries grapple with China's economic and military power in the region. Austin's visit comes as India strengthens its domestic defense industry and reduces its reliance on imports, particularly from Russia. Moscow is India's largest supplier of military hardware, even as the war in Ukraine continues. Austin and Indian Defense Minister Rajnath Singh explored ways to build resilient supply chains. They talked about ways to co-develop new systems and co-produce already existing tech. They also discussed regional security issues and committed to strengthening operational collaboration across all military services.
We are absolutely not trying to establish a NATO in the Indo-Pacific. We continue to work with like-minded countries to ensure that the region remains free and open.
Austin was expected to lay the groundwork for Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Washington on June 22nd. Modi's upcoming visit has fueled speculation about a possible announcement of defense contracts. Austin arrived in New Delhi from Singapore, where he attended the Shangri-La Dialogue, which is an annual forum bringing together top leaders and officials in the defense world. At the conference, he called on China to resume bilateral dialogue and engagements. Chinese defense and military officials have stopped contacts and engagements with their American counterparts. That culminated in the Chinese defense minister refusing to meet with Austin while they were both in Singapore. In other news, the military released video over the weekend of what it called an unsafe Chinese maneuver in the Taiwan Strait. A Chinese Navy ship cut sharply across the path of an American destroyer. That forced the U.S. vessel to slow down to avoid a collision. The incident occurred Saturday as the USS Chung-hoon and Canadian frigate HMCS Montreal were conducting a so-called freedom of navigation transit of the strait between Taiwan and mainland China. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said over the weekend the United States remains committed to maintaining the status quo on Taiwan and would prefer dialogue over conflict. Under the transit, the Chinese guided missile destroyer overtook the Chung-hoon on its port side. U.S. Indo-Pacific Command said it then veered across its bow. The American destroyer held its course, but reportedly reduced its speed to 10 knots to avoid a collision. Indo-PACOM said the actions violated maritime rules of safe passage in international waters. The Chinese ship did not attempt a similar maneuver on the Canadian frigate, which was sailing behind the American destroyer. A Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman defended the maneuver, saying it was undertaken in accordance with the law. Here's why it matters. You might remember the US recently accused China of also performing an unnecessarily aggressive maneuver in the air. It said a Chinese J-16 fighter jet flew directly in front of the nose of an Air Force reconnaissance aircraft over the South China Sea late last month. The close calls have raised concerns of a possible accident that could lead to an escalation between the two countries' militaries at a time when tensions in the region are already high. China claims the democratic self-governing island of Taiwan as part of its own territory and maintains the strait is part of its exclusive economic zone. The US and its allies regularly sail through and fly over the passage to emphasize their contention that the waters are international. Also on the radar for today, if you're in the Washington, D.C. area, you might have heard a loud boom over the weekend. That was a sonic boom from fighter jets that were dispatched to intercept an unresponsive business plane that flew over the nation's capital Sunday afternoon. The Air Force gave the F-16s permission to fly faster than the speed of sound, which caused the thunderous roar. 6 F-16s in total responded, according to the Pentagon. The first 2 to reach the business plane were from the 113th Fighter Wing out of Joint Base Andrews in Maryland. Others from New Jersey and South Carolina also responded. The Federal Aviation Administration says the Cessna Citation took off from Tennessee on Sunday and was headed for Long Island, New York. The plane turned around over New York and flew a straight path down over D.C. before it crashed over mountainous terrain near Montebello, Virginia around 3:30 p.m. Police say rescuers had reached the site of the plane crash in a rural part of the Shenandoah Valley and that no survivors were found. The plane flew directly over the nation's capital. Washington, D.C. has some of the most heavily restricted airspace in the nation. Flight tracking sites showed the jet suffered a rapid spiraling descent, dropping at one point at a rate of more than 30,000 feet per minute before crashing. And now, here are some other stories that we're hearing chirps about. President Joe Biden is welcoming Denmark and Britain's prime ministers this week to Washington for talks that will focus heavily on what lays ahead in the war in Ukraine. The Navy said its sailors and the United Kingdom Royal Navy aided a ship in the crucial Strait of Hormuz after Iran's Revolutionary Guard, quote, harassed it over the weekend. French President Emmanuel Macron awarded France's highest Medal of Honor to the U.S. Joint Chiefs Chairman, General Mark Milley, last week for his role in coordinating support for Ukraine and for his more than 40-year military career spent in defense of democracy. And 3 Israeli soldiers and an Egyptian officer died Saturday in a rare gun battle along Israel's southern border with Egypt.
You are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. In company
and
with
on this day in history, we're taking you back again to 1944. The Allied D-Day invasion of northern France began during World War II. France at the time was occupied by Nazi Germany, and the amphibious assault, codenamed Operation Overlord, landed Allied troops on the beaches of Normandy under the command of General Dwight Eisenhower. That's it for us this morning. To get more of the top stories and breaking news, go to defensenews.com/EBB to subscribe to the Early Bird Brief newsletter. Please give us a like, rating, and a comment wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to follow us on social media at @defense_news and @Military Times. The Early Bird Brief is hosted by me, Jonathan Lehrfeld, and produced by Zamone Z. Perez. Today's episode features stories by the Associated Press and Mike Young. Our editor-in-chief is Mike Bruce. Have a great day.